Welcome to the Make Do Suburban Fireman Podcast, where we're keeping it real, talking all things suburban fire service with your hosts, Nick Peppert and Sean Duffy. This podcast is done in partnership with the Rust Belt Jakes and Build Your Culture. So grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's go. All right, we are back. Season 4, kicking it off with, I can't think of a better person to kick it off with than Mr. Suburban Fire Tactics himself, Chief Jim Silvernail. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So this is a big milestone for us. We had a little bit of a sabbatical between season 3 and season 4, a few months here, but we're back in action. And you know, I got a chance to catch your class at FDIC. Really enjoyed it, right up my alley. And so I was literally sitting there, we're lining up stuff for season 4, and I'm like, man, we got to start this with Jim Silvernail. I don't know how we've gone 3 seasons prior to this without having you on the show. Being this is the Make Do Suburban Fireman Podcast. I mean, this is all things suburban fire service. So I don't know how it took us so long to get you on here, but man, I'm glad you're here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. You're very kind with your words. I don't consider myself the king of suburbia, but I just happen to have the benefit and the opportunity to write about it a lot. And here we are. And thank you for coming to my class. It was an honor to have you there.
Yeah, it was awesome to finally get to sit in and listen to you talk. You know, the book came out, I think it was 2013 you wrote the book.
Correct.
So if you guys are looking for good material to read, Suburban Fire Tactics came out a number of years ago. You get on Fire Engineering's website and the bookstore there. Check it out. Seriously, it is really a great book. But give us a little background on yourself. Give us a little bit, walk us through your fire service journey from where you started and your journey to get where you're at today.
Well, sure. I'm a second generation firefighter. My dad was a firefighter, fire chief in the area. I'm very fortunate to have that background. It took hold. I started off in our Explorer program and then volunteered around. Went to college. I got a degree in business administration, finance. Obviously, I'm not sitting in a bank somewhere. So it kind of, once it gets in your blood, it never leaves. But I had the fortune of starting off I've worked my whole career in suburban, a market here in St. Louis County. But I started off in a little city called Maplewood, Missouri, right next to the city, fairly busy. We had a bunch of decent fires when I was younger. And then I got my paramedic license and went out to Metro West, where I spent 17 years. I worked up through the ranks. I was a lieutenant, a captain. I was a captain. I was a company officer for about 9 to 10 years and then became a battalion chief. But I had the luck also of being able to teach in our fire academy, where I really took hold of some of this stuff. I really, truly think that being able to go out and teach really bolsters your career. Not only gives you the opportunity to speak in front of people, but it also gets you to hone your craft a little better. So, you really need to know what you're talking about if you're going to talk in front of recruits. So I spent the majority of my time at the academy teaching truck company operations, taught a lot of search, a lot of forcible entry, things of that nature. But then, I got into what I really got into, though, was writing standard operating procedures. I've been going to FDIC for years, even before I taught there, and I started noticing a difference in the way that we do things from the big cities. We can't do things like FDNY. We can't put ladders 4 on our firegrounds because we don't have the resources for it. So then we started evaluating our SOGs and our SOPs a little tighter, and noticed that we needed to bolster that front line a little bit better than what we were doing. So I got into writing standard operating guidelines, started writing them for the county a bit. We do have what's known as a standardized system, even though that we're somewhat dysfunctional in that we have 88 paid fire stations in St. Louis County. It's represented by 42 different agencies. So having a standard operating guideline that's really followed by all is one way to handle that dysfunction. And I think we do it pretty well. Are there better ways to do things? Sure. But the way we're doing it now with the one group of standard operating guidelines is really the way to go. But then, as my time clicked on, I did cross into the dark waters of becoming a chief. And I've been here at the city of Kirkwood now for the last 8 years, where I've done various different things in the chief's organizations. I'm currently the president of the Missouri Valley Division of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Try to say that in one sentence. I'm just trying to do my bit here in the fire service, as many of us are. But like I said, I've had a lot of opportunities that I'm very proud of. But like I said, thanks for having me on your show again.
Yeah. So, awesome kind of backstory there. I think for people listening, it's always good to hear kind of your journey. And it really, I mean, I like that you brought out that, kind of getting into the teaching world kind of helped spur your career path a little bit and your outlook on the job. Because I agree, one of the best ways to hone your craft and your skill is to constantly be putting in the work to research, learn, grow, train, and be prepared for those classes, right? To be able to do that is huge. And I think one of the things I want to really kind of hone in on too is I think when you're rubbing shoulders with people from all over the place, right? Different walks of life, different backgrounds, this is what I've learned. And maybe you've had the same experience, but a lot of times I pick up stuff from people all over the country. Getting to do classes, we were at MAFC this last week and we're doing a class, and man, I'm always taking notes. I'm always picking up on the nuances, because from one place to the next, there may be different philosophies on stuff, different mindsets, different little tidbits of information. And even though I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the material, there's always things to learn, right? There's always things to glean from people. And that's one of the beauties of getting involved outside of your own bubble, even, right? Getting involved with teaching at the academy, teaching regionally, nationally, or being involved with writing, things like that through different venues and avenues. I just really appreciate the fact that you bring that out, because I think that so many people think that, oh, you see these guys teaching in FDIC or whatever, like they're on this different level, and I think what it comes down to is just constantly challenging yourself to be better, right? And rubbing shoulders with people who make you better. By default, it's that iron sharpens iron thing, right?
100%. I can't agree with you enough. Like I said, it's very frustrating when you come back and you see a couple closed-minded people that they haven't gotten out, and they just haven't had an opportunity really to get out and see the different part, how people do it outside the bubble. But once you do that, your eyes open up and you're like, holy cow, people do really, our objectives are all the same. We're here for the same reason, protecting life, saving life, protecting property, conserving the environment. But really, we do it so many different ways. And people are like, well, it's simple. You put the wet stuff on the red stuff. But there are so many different ways to do it in our business. You can't just pick up, the IFSTA guide after rookie school and say, oh, I've got all the information I need. That's like the beginning of that's the tip. That's the beginning. And there's just so much more. I can't tell people enough. What really changed our fire department and our culture was having the ability to send a lot of people to FDIC and really seeing how others live and how they do things and how they do business. And it really made a big difference in our fire department, our culture, in our knowledge base. We gained so much. And I really think that, tactically, I mean, you can always improve tactically. I don't care who you are. You can always improve tactically. But I think that getting there is half the battle, getting to a proficiency level. And I really attribute that to FDIC and a lot of these other classes. But yeah, you said it. There's a value of getting outside the box for sure. 100%. So
there's this kind of, this mantra in the suburban fire service and in suburban and rural, really, we get this phrase that doing more with less becomes kind of the running theme in the suburban fire service. And I want to get your thoughts on some of the key differences you see between like where you operate versus the urban setting. In suburbia, what are some things that you really key in on as a chief, as a company officer coming up through the ranks and things like that, things that you notice that really are the big differences between the suburban setting and the urban setting?
I think really you can factor on, you can focus on three major factors, and that is the staffing, the resources, and the response area characteristics. I think those are the real big ones. Obviously, those can be divided up. But when you look at your staffing, we don't have 4-person engine companies all the time. Sometimes we do because we're trying to get to that 1710 benchmark. but it's not always going to be there. So we focus a lot of our tactics on the minimals. When you write a standard operating guideline, it should be focused on the minimals that you could possibly have. And for us, that's three-person engine companies, three-person companies in general. And you really have to take tactics into consideration. And then it's not just the amount of people, it's also their training levels. If you've got a younger fire department, younger officer corps, you're not going to be able to do the same functionality that somebody that's well progressed, that has that knowledge, skills, and abilities. When I was a battalion chief, I had a great battalion. I had 5 engine houses, pretty typical suburban department, 7 company officers, and I trained with them, and I knew what their capabilities were. I knew that when I went to a fire, I could be a traffic cop. I could say, this is the standard operating guideline. You go to work by the arrival order that you're assigned. Every once in a while, I'll be like, no, step back. We got to call an audible here. But the majority of the time, I could sit there and traffic cop. Now, if you don't have the company officers that have that experience or that level or don't have that training, it's a different story. You're working on a completely different system. You're now more of a directed company IC than you are of just what I just explained. And also as a company officer too, if you've got people who've just basically got out of the fire academy, you're holding their hand, right? As opposed to having a 15-year person, you're like, hey, I'm going to go upstairs. We're going to do an oriented search. I'm going to go left. You're going to go right. I'm going to take this room. You take that room. Let's meet in the hallway. I can't do that with a 2-month person out of the fire academy. So it's not just the numbers involved. It's also the training and personnel. And then, you go on to the second factor of resources. Well, we don't have, and I don't say always and never, but the majority of suburban markets, even though we do have a lot of differences, one of the main common themes is we don't have true dedicated truck companies. As you saw in my class, I always ask, you have dedicated truck companies? A couple of hands go, or you have truck companies? A couple of hands go up. I'm like, well, do those ladders have engines beside them? No. Well, I got news for you. Those aren't true dedicated truck companies because they might function as a truck company in your system, but if they arrive first, they have decisions to make that might involve hose or not involve hose or involve tools. In a true dedicated system, and we'll get to that in a second, with the positional versus the functional, they're not just going to do truck work. They're going to do engine work as well. So, having a system set up that works with your resources really is key. If you don't have truck companies and you're like, well, how am I getting this? How am I getting the support for the initial actions that I want to take, like the initial line? That's it isn't a question for 3 a.m. where you don't have a plan. You better have a plan for it. And then, of course, the last is response area characteristics. And I think a lot of us, even in rural markets, you will have different response areas, different building construction types, different geographic features, et cetera. But you better take that into consideration when you're building your game plan.
Yeah, I love that. Man, you hit on a couple really, really good points. And one of those being the importance of strong SOGs. Having SOGs that where you talk about being the traffic cop, where if everybody's on the same plan, on the same playbook, so to speak, and having clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And then, obviously you factor in experience. And I want to hit on something real quick. Do you feel like in suburbia as a whole, there tends to be less experience, or do you find it fairly equivalent as far as just kind of, or is it just kind of department to department? I mean, what has your experience been with the Suburban Fire Service? When it comes to, training experience, things like that, do you feel like we're at a slightly different position than our urban counterparts when it comes to those roles?
I do, just for the simple fact that, and it depends on who you're really relating to. If you're relating to the firefighter of the 70s compared to now, obviously we're not fighting the fire that they like our fathers used to. It's totally different. Our call volume's down, so therefore you really have to take longer time periods and more training to try to get to that proficiency level. But in urban cities where they're having more volume, where if you're dedicated to a truck or you're dedicated to an engine, and you can focus onto the one skill set, I think you build a greater proficiency. Where out here, like I said, it's you have less call volume. You have to be a jack of all trades. It's harder to build that proficiency set. It takes a longer time period, or it takes more training. Or more dedication. It can happen. I'm not saying that we suck in suburban America. I'm just saying that it takes a little bit of more effort to build that than it does in, say, a busy company where you're running, 2 fires a day compared to maybe 1 fire a month. Totally different story. But you know what? Fires still happen, and they burn the same temperature. So I mean, you got to be ready for them. But yeah, I mean, I think it is a challenge, and like I said, it definitely is. Like I said, I do think it takes us longer to build that skill set.
Yeah, and so kind of on that note, and this is something I know we've talked about on the show before. You kind of talk about being a jack of all trades. I feel like in the suburban fire service, you kind of do have to wear a lot of different hats, and I liken it to. I mean, like I said, one fire you may be doing engine work, the next you may be doing truck work, because you have to, right? Because the order of arrival based on what needs to happen on the fire ground, and so I see this connection in the urban fire service. Guys may ride a truck company their entire career, and that's all they know is truck work, and specifically maybe they're the irons guy or the can man or whatever, and like they know that position, those duties inside and out, and they specialize in those specific tasks, whereas we tend to be a little bit more spread out and generalized and have to be able to do it all in suburbia. But I just want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, in a way, does that tend to lend itself? Obviously there's training, there's education, there's other components that come into this, but in your experience, do you feel like in a lot of ways the suburban firefighter almost has to be a little bit more well-rounded than the urban counterpart? I mean, do you feel like that's something that when we're training in the suburban setting, we have to kind of drive into our people to understand, like, you really have to be good at more than one discipline?
I totally agree with that. Not only do our firefighters have to be well-rounded, but there has to be a culture that supports that. Culture is such a big part of this. I will tell you, one of the things that I concentrate on heavily is truck company operations, because I'm going to say it again, we suck at it because we don't have the proficiency level, and because everything we have has a pump and a hose on it. Everybody feels obligated to, get the water on the fire. But guess what? There's a lot of functions that have to support water on the fire that we could miss if we don't have that culture ingrained in us to make that happen. How do you get that culture within your fire departments is critical. But I will tell you, there's nothing more effective than an engine sitting next to a ladder truck. But guess what's not going to happen? I can tell you this. As the chief of suburban department in this whole area, I'm not ever going to get the resource funding to do that. Never. I can push all day long and say, I've written this book. I've done this. I've been to 1710. This is what we have to do. Guess what's not going to happen? That. So instead of just crying about it, we have to develop these systems that will work to support our fire attack. And, and a lot of that, like I said, is culture and being well-rounded. Culture is a huge, huge part of this. I've seen departments who will not embrace the truck company culture. They don't believe that we have trucks, so therefore we don't do it. But you know what? Like I said, fires can't just go out by just putting water on fire. There has to be supporting tactics that go along with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things you talked about in your book and in your class was the concept of facilitating companies. And I'd like you just to kind of expound a little bit more on, how do you instill, number one, you're talking about culture, building that truck culture. And it's not necessarily, that you are on a truck company. There are tasks that have to happen at every fire. And sometimes that means engine companies doing it, or Quints, or whoever. Medic units. A lot of places have medic units, and a lot of those functions are being completed or have to be completed by those firefighters. So I want to just kind of dig in here for a minute and really focus on the importance of not thinking of it as, I didn't arrive with an aerial on top of my apparatus, so therefore I don't do truck work. Let's dive in on that for a minute, on the facilitating companies, the mindset behind it. And we can kind of segue into the functional versus positional functions on the fireground.
So to start off, I think the critical thing here is to understand what functions have to go in order, right? What supports the main impact to the fireground. So when we prioritize what makes the biggest impact on the fireground, obviously it's going to be putting water on the fire. So, one of our most critical things that we're going to do is get a line off the fire apparatus and try to get that line in place and knock down as much fire as possible. But once again, it goes back to like, and you saw I love football, right? And I love coordinating it because a football play, if you understand football, it all coordinates together. It's not a matter of going in the backyard and saying, hey, I'm going to go run this route. I'm going to throw you the football. But yeah, catching the football is a big part of putting the fire out or making the play happen. But guess what? In a game of football, that's not the only thing that's happening. There's blocking. There's all kind of segments going on to make that play successful. And it's the same thing with firefighting. Our blockers are the truck company operations. Who's going to, first of all, how are you getting inside the building? Forcible entry. How are you getting access to the structure? You might have to ladder or you might have to get above grade. How are you supporting the block or how are you supporting ventilation? All these things have to be taken into factor to make it happen. And a lot of times, we're successful with crappy tactics. I hate to tell you this, but we are successful 9 out of 10 times with pulling a line up the truck with no idea of strategy or tactics and opening up a nozzle and flowing water and putting it out. Hey, I've seen a gardener go out there and spray water. It's not hard, right? But then there's going to be that 10th fire that requires a little bit of effort, above grade, below grade, forcible entry, somebody trapped. This is why we have to coordinate these functions and facilitate these actions. So back to your initial question, Nick, how do we facilitate that? So obviously, there's a lot of actions that have to facilitate that main line getting put in place. We just talked about it. How does that line actually move? Can two people actually move an attack line? Sometimes you have to supplement that attack line to make it work, above grade, below grade. Forcible entry. These are the facilitating actions that have to happen. In my opinion, if you write an SOG correctly, or a POM or whatever you call it, every attack line should have some form of facilitation factor, especially if you only run with 3-person engine companies, putting 2 people on a line. Who's helping support that line? Because let me tell you something. If you got that 6-month person on that tip and you're the officer behind him, now you're the corners, the backups, the boss. You're doing a lot of functionality and you're really not able to do your full job. But if another company comes in and says, hey, you know what? I'm not pulling another line until we get this line put in place, and I'm going to help facilitate this line and do all the work that's necessary, I'm getting there. But so back to the word facilitate too. So, the funny story is I use facilitate a lot in my book, and it's not because I came up with this great idea. It's because it was the way I sold it, because the culture of the fire department, remember, this is back in the late 90s, the early 2000s, when, hey, kid, we don't have truck companies here. Don't use that dirty word. Well, we do, but we call it facilitate. So now we are facilitating that line. So like I said, there's a lot of actions that have to go together to make that line. The number one comment that I use is no other action on the fire ground saves more lives and property than the properly sized, properly placed, and properly timed attack line. And you're going to say, well, that's all engine work. That's not correct. If you look at the 3 different pieces of that, the properly sized, sure, that's all engine. I mean, there's not going to be any facilitation there. Properly placed, properly timed. Well, guess what? Sometimes there's facilitating actions that have to help place that line. How are you getting access to the fire? They don't just all present itself in a nice corner for you to come hit it like at the burn tower. You might have to get in the walls, get in the ceilings, get access. You might actually force an entry. These are things properly timed. I got to coordinate ventilation. I got to get in there in a proper time. I might have to help this line. Those are all facilitated. So there's a lot that has to go in place in putting a hand line in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it is funny because coming up in the suburban fire service, I cut my teeth in suburbia, and even now, I work for the city department, this is probably the best analogy, and I use it all the time now because it really makes sense when you think about it. A lot of us even in city departments, we have urban problems with suburban staffing and resources. That's how I look at it. It's like, yeah, do we have, we do have some high rises. We're not New York City or Chicago or Milwaukee or anything like that, but we do have some buildings that are over 8 stories. We have commercial. We have some industrial. We have, an interstate running through our district. We have, some of these shipping and receiving yards, things like that. And waterways, and we have problems that you might find in an urban setting. Yeah, I work for a city department, but make no mistake about it, it is very much a suburban department. We run 3-man engines. It's just the world that we live in. Even in a city department, it is not all urban joy and bliss with 4 or 5 guys on a rig and heavy rescue companies and dedicated trucks doing everything. I mean, we just now our ladder company, we got a new truck spec without a pump. It's going to be a true dedicated truck, but one truck for the whole city.
Wow.
Everything else is engine, and we do have one quint as well. So it's kind of like one of those things, like, you know, coming up in the Suburban Fire Service, so many times where these truck functions, these traditional truck functions, you can't think of it like that. It's what needs to happen, whether that's coordinated ventilation or forcible entry, primary search. You know, with all the data coming out in recent years on search and in the importance of getting in and getting people out of that environment. You know, we can't be relying on, well, I'm going to let the truck do search. Well, the truck may be, you know, operating as an engine, or the truck may be 5th due, 6th due on a fire. So how effective is that to accomplishing our mission of saving lives and property if we're waiting for the one truck company to show up on scene that's 5th due?
You can't wait. You know, that's the thing, is that, you know, we can't forget why we're here. You know, we're here to save lives. That's the number one thing we do. You know, and a lot of people think, oh, you know, in suburban America, they really devalue vertical ventilation. And it's like, no, I don't devalue it. But the thing is that when I prioritize my resources and I've only got a 3-person engine company and I got to facilitate that, I want that whoever is assigned truck company operations to be on the fire floor, because they need to be doing a lot of things to help that line. And also, don't forget, we're searching. You know, I want those people on that floor. Now, everybody's job on a fire is search. It doesn't matter what company you're on. Everybody's job is to search. But I want those people on that fire floor to help with that search, to help with accessing fire, to really locating fire, to controlling, you know, identifying flow path, and to get the job done. Now, later on, our you know, we dictate the way we operate is that we try to assign 2 companies to do truck company operations. The first one who's been assigned will call back and say, hey, look, I'm on the fire floor. You're going to have to take care of the rest of the levers you. So they're going to either have to look for the ventilation profile if it hasn't happened, maybe get on a roof. But I will tell you, by that time, it's probably too late, because, you know, I will tell you, if you do ventilation correctly, it assists the fire tech. What we do is we do smoke removal. And I'm not proud of that just because we can't time it. We should always be looking for that ventilation profile, because, you know, it's helping the people we're saving, and it's also helping our firefighters. But when you say, hey, okay, I got the fire knocked down, I think it's about time for ventilation, that's smoke removal. You know, that's not truly helping out what the fire attack was. If I can coordinate that and get those companies, you know, it's like, if I can get that company on that same level and say, okay, guess what? Whoever outside, ready to knock. I'm ready to knock out that glass. I'm ready to hit the fire. Boom. That's the way to go. But like I said, because of our resources, it just doesn't work very well from that vertical standpoint. But, you know, if you look at the research, vertical ventilation is one of the most effective ventilation tools there is. It's just that we just can't do it because of the prior. I shouldn't say that we can't do it. I'm just saying we don't do it that often because of the coordination and the resources that we have. But yeah, you're right. The prioritization should be on that fire floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we've got really 2 things we need to accomplish, and that is to remove the threat, i.e. a fire attack and ventilation, right? We get the heat and the smoke away from our victims and ourselves, right, to make our job safer and more effective. And then the yang to that is remove the victims from the environment.
Right.
And you know, really, if you look at it on any fire, attack and search are the two tactics the tasks that save the most lives, right? That's right. Where our most bang for our buck. When you look at the firefighter rescue survey, it's no surprise primary search finds the most victims, followed by fire attack, because we're in the structure. We're going to the heart of the fire. We're going to the most threatened people, and you know, I love the fact that you kind of talked about the engine search, right? Kind of searching off the line as we go, and being cognizant of search even as we make our way to the seat of the fire, because it is imperative that we have a plan in place for if we find a victim on the way to the fire, what are we doing with that victim? And in a limited staffing scenario, if you haven't crossed that bridge in your mind ahead of time, you're going to be hard pressed. Like people, sometimes, dropping the line and all going on and pulling this person out may not be the most realistic or best thing to happen at that moment, right? It may be as simple as like, hey, let's pull him in this room, close the door, get some more hands in here, and finish putting this fire out. And it is situational, right? People go down this road. I see this in like promotional testing all the time, where you have the scenario where you got to make a choice. Are you going for search? Are you going for attack? You got 3-man engine. Like, what are you going to do? And the thing is, it depends, right? It depends because it depends on the resources, it depends on how much fire you got. It depends on, how many victims, the location of those victims. There's so many variables that come into that, but that's why, we really have to make the most out of the resource pool that we have. And sometimes that means, putting the fire out and then taking care of that stuff, right? Or maybe it's, if I do have another company right behind me is, hey, you guys are going to be attacked. We're going all in and search. And again, that is very much, unlike our urban counterparts that may roll up with an engine and a truck on the scene at the same time. A lot of times the company officers in the suburban setting are in single company houses, and they're having to make that decision knowing their second due maybe is a couple minutes out.
You know what? You just hit it on the head. I do want to say I'm a big believer in SOGs and SOPs, but there is a time to deviate. There's 3 main things that we concentrate on. It's training, it's having a game plan, but it's also experienced company officers, because there will be a time where you have to call an audible, and you just gave one of those. There's a couple times where I can think in my career where I had to call an audible. One is, if you pull up and you've got an imminent rescue, and what I mean by imminent, everything is there. Like you have to understand what's going on. Where is that person located? How many of them are there? And can you quickly access them? Is it faster to access them and get them out? Or is it faster to pull a hose line off and get yourself get that hazard isolated so you can get to those victims? Because you do have to make those decisions. You are by yourself. But like I said, you got to let circumstances dictate your action. I mean, if you do have somebody on your bumper, absolutely go for rescue and have somebody else, or you get a line and say you got to get a rescue right now. These are critical ideas, and you never go to the same fire. You might go to a fire in the same apartment building that constantly happens, but it's never the same circumstance. So that's why having this level of experience is so critical, just to get that line, or understand what you're doing to save lives. I mean, the bottom line is you got to understand what are our objectives. Don't lose focus of what the objectives are. Sure, we're going to achieve them in different ways, but if you're trying to save a life, really try to think about all the circumstances that are either constrain or enhance that ability.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you talked about in your class that I really wanted to kind of discuss for a few minutes is the difference between, like, in the urban setting, you show up on a truck company, you're doing truck work, and when you're on a rescue company, you're doing rescue company details or squad or whatever. In suburbia, that's not really always the case. And so I want to talk about functional versus positional mindsets on the fireground, and how in the suburban setting, kind of that deviates from our urban counterparts that are able to focus kind of more single focused on, hey, this is what we do, this is how we function. And we're kind of dancing around it a little bit here, but I just really want to kind of discuss on a fireground in Kirkwood. If you show up, what is kind of your thought process on do you guys do stuff based on arrival order of, hey, if you're first engine or second engine, first aerial, second aerial, how do you break it down in your system for kind of who does what?
Right. So in our county, we primarily operate, we always operate under a functional system. In the meaning of that is that your function is dependent on the priority that needs to happen in your arrival order. So you could pull up with a tower ladder, you could pull up with a quint. It doesn't matter at that time. It's what your crew's going to do, not the apparatus. The apparatus does not dictate your function on that fire ground. If my tower ladder shows up first, and they've got fire in a building, or they have somebody within there, and they got to get the fire attack quickly. They're an engine. Their crew is an engine. The tower ladder is still a tower ladder. It's just still on the front of the building and positioned as a ladder would. But the crew is going to operate as an engine company. And then vice versa. If the next facilitating action needs the truck floor or that fire floor truck, you could pull up in an engine company. And guess what? You're going to be fulfilling that action of filling as a truck company, even though that you're a pure engine. It doesn't really matter what's on top. I mean, we still have to get our ladders to the front of the building, in your engine chauffeur or your ladder chauffeur has to primarily think like a truck chauffeur, but then immediately goes to the engine, to the pump. But that really is the only difference. So in a functional system, you're talking about the crew, not the apparatus. And it's just critical because all these things have to come together like a good play. And I really can't wait for my truck company to get there, or my ladder, and say, hey, we're waiting for all truck work to get here until this tower ladder gets here. Well, it's on the opposite side of town, and there's stuff that has to happen. So I can't, the priority of things that have to happen can't wait just because that apparatus has a ladder on it. So yeah, we're truly functional pretty much in all of our county. Even the city of St. Louis is somewhat functional because they only have really one truck company per borough or per district, pretty much like you were saying. So even though you might have one truck company, you still might work functional in the fact that your engine might get there, pull a line off. The second, if you do two, or the second or the third arriving, does the truck work and your ladder's still not there, they better go to truck work. And then that ladder can combine with that company to become the truck group, if you will. But it still is somewhat functional because your arrival orders depending what you are on the fire ground. I know for some of us, especially in big cities, that's a weird concept, but it's just the way we've always done things. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, so St. Louis kind of really was the OG like Quint concept, and so you've obviously are very familiar with the shift towards that mindset, and now kind of maybe back away from it a little bit. What are some of the challenges you see? Some of the biggest challenges you've seen with the Quint concept? I think obviously that the idea was like, hey, we can go either direction if we need to be an engine or a truck. But what are some of the things that you've seen that have been challenging with that mindset, or with the Quint apparatus in general?
Sure. So, back in the 80s, St. Louis, Chief Satanics went to all Quint concept. I think they ordered 15 LTI 75 footers, and I think the Pierces were 50 foots. But they were all completely, every engine house had a Quint in it. And then I think every district they tried to put a hook and ladder or rescue squad in, so there was one true truck company. But so they went to this, but they're going back now. So there's engines back in the districts. There's still Quints that operate as Quints, do truck work as well. But really, one of the main factors was maintenance. What do we really do on a daily basis? And it's go to EMS calls and and minor things. I mean, don't get me wrong, we got to be ready for fires. But when 90% of your work is start, stop, that takes a heavy toll on your apparatus. I think that was one main factor. But another factor is that these apparatus really don't make good engine companies. You might think after you hear my class that I hate Quints. We have to have them in suburban America because it's the only way we're going to get aerial devices on our fire grounds. But they truly are horrible fire engines if you think about it. I mean, if you look at the hose beds, most people get upset. They're like, oh, you took away my tower ladder. You took away my 100-footer. I lost 25 foot of ladder. No, you didn't. You lost a hose bed is what you lost, because when we convert these engines to Quints, you're limited in your attack modules, your attack, whatever you have. You're not going to have the bundles anymore in the back because you can't. They won't fit back there. So how do you make it happen? Well, obviously, we all know that you deploy 2.5 or 3 inch as best as you can, and then hook up your hotel pack or your bundle to it. But back in the day, we used to drop that load off, or that I didn't, but our dads or whatever, or forefathers would drop that load off and go to the hydrant, and they didn't even need large diameter hose. You can't do that with Quints. It's a totally different ballgame. and it really takes away some of your functional, your attack packages. So, a lot of us think, oh, I got a 200-foot pre-connect, or, oh, you know what? I even went to a 300-foot pre-connect. Well, guess what? I've gone to courtyard stretches that have been well past the 300 mark, or have required a larger attack line than the pre-connected 1.75 inch. So, we've kind of lost that. Oh, I can put every fire out with the 1.75 inch, pre-connect that sits right, behind the cab. Well, there's a lot more. The working ends of the fire trucks used to be the rear end. I mean, that was the cat's meow. You pull up, you make sure that rear end shows you the fire, because that's where the working end is. We've lost that a little bit because of this reliance to the pre-connect and our hose beds. I ask kids in my class all the time, when's the last time has anybody worked on a fire apparatus with the hose that's turned on its side? And you get these looks like, what the hell are you talking about? Hose on its side. It's like, well, not everything is flat loaded. There were certain things, accordions, horseshoes, things that when I first came on an engine company, they had different attack packages. Not anymore. But that was one limitation with the Quint. Like I said, you got to have a game plan for them to work properly. If not, it's a tool that's not going to fit within your system.
Yeah, no, 100%. It is definitely challenging. And I mean, having worked in systems with Quints for, many years, it really does kind of handicap you as an engine, right? There's certain things you cannot do well with the Quint, and vice versa. As a truck company, pumps and tanks and hose trays take up space that you lose the ability to have all those extra tools and equipment and things that you might expect to see on a traditional like truck company only. And it does. It just changes the dynamic. But like you said, I mean, in most of suburbia, we're not in systems where we have the luxury of multi-company houses where an engine and a ladder roll out together. Or even if they do, there's a strong chance that Quint may be operating independently for a while. So a lot of chiefs are like, hey, we need pump and hose because the reality of it is that there's a lot of places in our district where they're going to be functioning more as an engine than a ladder. And so the takeaway from it, I think, is you got to obviously work within your system. You got to work with what you've got. But I think like that's where, going back to your functional versus positional mindset, you can't get pigeonholed in this idea that, well, I have an aerial on my truck. So, in suburbia, a lot of times it's like, hey, if the first line's not moving, it doesn't matter if you have an aerial on the top of your truck, your second do anyway. Someone's got to facilitate getting that line to the seat of the fire, right? It doesn't matter if you're on an engine. If search needs to be done, search needs to be done. It's what's best for the citizen, not what's best for you necessarily. And that's the real world that we live in the suburban setting. I mean, heck, think about this. I mean, we're teaching hose classes. And how many times, I ask people, how many people are on your rig? 3, sometimes 2. Very few are, you go to classes. A lot of times, most people don't have a guaranteed 4th person on their engine all the time. Some do, but a lot of people don't. And so who ends up being the heel on the attack line?
The boss.
The boss.
Yeah.
The boss isn't supervising.
Right.
He's pulling hose. He's going back 15
Your head's down. You're not interior benchmarking.
Right.
You're letting that firefighter who might have 2 months on get ahead of you by 10, 15 feet. Yep. I mean, it really isn't. And, what cracks me up, Nick, is that, we had an SOG. This is really where we changed the course of the world in our world was, hey, guess what? If you're second due, don't pull another line. Get up there and enforce this line so we can put 4 people on a line. Just because your apparatus doesn't respond with 5, let's make it work. Let's get the oomph on that first due attack line. But I will tell you circumstances, right? Our circumstances that we have a ton of resources coming in behind us. It might not be concentrated on one unit, but if it's coming in, I can do that. I know backup lines are critical. They're absolutely essential. However, it's also essential to knock fire out as soon as possible. That's the key. And the more emphasis you can put on that first line is really, really the answer. I've had a lot of people ask me, okay, you wrote this book, Suburban Fire Tactics. What are the gimmicks? What can I do with lower staffing? Is there a weapon that I can choose? Is there a nozzle? No, it's about fire tactics. Fire tactics put out fire, not gimmicks. Now, I will tell you there's tools to help us. For example, I've always been a big fan of the fog nozzle on 2.5s. I don't believe we should have fog nozzles on 2.5s with 3-person staffing because of the nozzle reaction, things of that nature. Pre-connects work for us too because they are made to easily get off the apparatus. Unfortunately, we've become too mindset, and that's the only thing we have. But Yeah, it's all about tactics, and tactically putting fire out takes away the problem. And that's what we're looking for. Put emphasis on that first due line with facilitation and everything else.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, and really, you hit it on the head. At the end of the day, we have to figure out how to do the most good rather, with what we have. And so what does that look like? And so I want to kind of segue into discussing some things that you think are kind of force multipliers in the suburban setting, force multipliers that help us be more effective, whether it be, splitting, split search, marrying companies on a line, using your drivers in a working capacity, like working drivers, whether that's, using a secondary driver as your outside vent, throwing ladders, softening the building, booster backup's a big discussion point in the suburban fire service. We've done it for a long time, but it's just one of those things that I think that's where when we start segueing tactically away from like the urban mindset where the engine does this, the truck does this, getting to more functional, figuring out ways to get more juice out of the lemon, so to speak, squeeze it a little bit more. You are correct. I think, there is a point where we have to be honest with ourselves and know our limitations. We have to understand that we can only do so much with the staffing that we have, but how do we maximize in your mind, as the fire chief, when you're writing SOGs or when you're doing training, what are some things that you see operationally that maybe give us a little bit of a, upper hand, if you will, on the fire, that give us that force multiplication that allow us to be the best that we can possibly be, right? To do the most work in the shortest amount of time, and really build in efficiency, because that's what we have to do. Right? We can't throw numbers at a fire, so we have to use the smaller resource pool that we have to the fullest potential.
Well, I think I hit on a couple of them, but really the best thing to understand is your staffing. What are they truly capable of at the single resource level? I mean, if you've got an engine company of 3 people and you think they're going to pull 2 lines off, force a door, get inside of a structure, and put a fire out quickly above grade or even below grade, good luck. Okay. I think realism is the first part of this. Realism and understanding what you can do. Second of all, you need to understand what your resources can truly do for you. What is assigned to your box alarm or your first alarm, and how fast do you get them? Okay, so we get 6 pieces of apparatus, which some people think is overkill. But really what that is, that's still your 3 and 2 model, 3 engines, 2 trucks. They don't look like that, but that's the idea. Three engines, 2 trucks, and a RIT team, right? So those are your 6 pieces of apparatus. If you can get those quickly, but they don't have 4 people on them, well, guess what? Use them to the best of your advantage. Don't pull another line off right away. I'm not going to say always, because things are different. Put emphasis on that front line. Really look at the objectives that you're trying to achieve. How many fires have you really gone to where if the first line wasn't working, the second line put a lot of fire out, right? If not, then maybe pull a 2.5 off. Not in residential sometimes because of the maneuverability. But still, the majority of the time, that first line is putting that fire out, and the second line's backing it up like it should. There are times for backup lines. There are times for secondary lines. But let's get as much emphasis on that small window that we have with that first attack line. Let's marry up those companies. Let's put all the emphasis there. Let's get our first due, what we would call truck company or assigned company that's going to do operations on that fire floor to assist. Let's not throw them on a roof right away. And I know that people are going to be screaming when they hear this. But in my world, that's where that company should be. I believe that they should be on that fire floor assisting our fire attack and our search and our life-saving abilities. If we got to get on a roof, there's a time and place, 100%. But for me, my bang for my buck has got to be on that fire floor. You said it before. There are gimmicks don't put out fires, but there are weapons that are more useful for us. Understanding your hose loads, making hose loads that work for your situation better. For a 2-person, 3-person attack line. Having that set up on your apparatus, training. I can't tell you enough how important training is. Like I said before, I have a quint. Okay, well, how do you make this courtyard stretch? Oh, it's simple. I just pull off about 300 foot of 3 or 2.5, and I attack our bundle to it. Okay, easier said than done, right? Have you done it? No. I've looked at pictures. I've seen it. I'm like, well, you're not going to do it right. Or you're not going to do it effectively fast, And then usually that is not that's not a 1 company job. That's a 2 company, maybe even 3, depending. But have you practiced loading up your people a 75-foot with a 15-foot loop in between and doing like an improvised Minuteman, getting it to where you are and then hooking up that line and going to work. Once again, that doesn't happen without training because we don't do it every day. But these are the things that you have to do to make yourself successful in our markets, because we're not flooded with people. You don't have people at every turn. And you said too, I like what you said too about the engineers. We gotta get every bit of juice out of the squeeze. If I got somebody that's, the committee of engineers, have you ever heard that, where everybody helps out? How many people are truly pumping, but you need that guy on your shoulder? Or could I use that person on my shoulder inside the fire, helping my attack line? But I know it seemed like it took an act of God to put some of our engineers in. Am I saying something that's not right? Because I see you laughing. I know you've experienced the same thing.
No, it's funny.
No, I'm just saying it's true. It's true.
It is.
Sometimes your engineering gear, you're like, I don't do that. Like, well, you're the third person. I had when I was a first captain, I had an engineer, and he was an engineer for at least 5 years, so he wasn't a new guy. He would put his bunkers on every fire, and I know what people say, you shouldn't drive a fire apparatus in bunkers and blah, 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 blah. But Chris could get there, and if we weren't pumping, he had his gear on fast, and he wanted a tool in his hand. He was ready to go. And let me tell you something. You know what that did to my crew? Oomph, oomph. I mean, I had a way more ability to make impact on the fire ground. But it was great. But, yeah, little things, that you have to consider. I don't know if I want to get into it here, but your co-host co-authored a pretty good article I just read on the 2 in and 2 out. And I don't know if we want to weigh in on that today, but I got to tell you, it goes right into what we're saying.
Yeah.
I was on 1710 before I got the Chiefs job, and 2 in 2 out, is in there. It basically says, the IRIC, it's defined as IRIC there. But I got to tell you, I have different viewpoints on this. Put the fire out, right? And if I've got an officer that's sitting in the front yard because we can't go in and we're letting the fire grow, or I'm sending a hose line in with only 2 people. Never send a hose line in with 1 person. But you got 2 people and you're not making a quick, steady attack. I don't think you're doing your job, and I don't think that you are absolutely doing what you're supposed to do. The 2 in 2 out thing, we're right on each other's bumper, so it's never stopped our operation. We've never really hesitated or waited. We've always had the ability to put 2 people in, and somehow miraculously 2 people are always outside. But I often ask people, I'm like, when are you allowed to violate 2 in and 2 out? And they're like, well, anytime a car's in the front yard, I'm like, no, that's technically not right. And I'm not playing fire chief here. I'm just saying, if you go by the rules, which is crazy, you're supposed to have somebody actually trapped that you know about, and then you actually have to have that company officer write a letter to your fire chief. How crazy is that? I'm just explaining the rules. I've never had anybody write me a letter, and never have I written a letter. But I'm just saying that's my point of view of this, and I think it goes right in line with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think people forget sometimes that, we have a job to do, right? And I think Andy Frederick said it best, right? If we put the fire out, people don't have to jump out of windows.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the point of the article, I think when we start looking at some of the things in the data over the last few years, whether it be Project Mayday, the Firefighter Rescue Survey, the UL data that's coming out, there's so much more data in the fire service now than ever before. We're being able to kind of quantify some of our decision making and our policies and our rules, and I certainly think that at the end of the day, it comes down to what are we trying to accomplish, right? Are we truly here for life safety, property conservation, right? Are we really trying to do what's best for the citizen? And there's a balance here, right? There's that balance of obviously, I think that there has to be some redundancy built in for our people, right? We're not just trying to sacrifice firefighters, just throwing them in there like, hey, have at it. Like, I think there has to be order. I think there has to be structure. But I also think that to handcuff ourselves as a fire service and say, well, we don't have enough people, so sorry, you're going to have to wait until we get more units here to go in and put your fire out or pull the people out of the building. I think that there really is maybe that pendulum has swung maybe too far the other direction. And I know everybody's got opinions on that, but I think when you look at the mission of the fire service, it really comes down to really very simple in the sense of, look, put the fire out, get the people out. Put the fire out, get the people out.
And I think that's why it's so essential to have a game plan. All these functions have to go together to make it work. I know you, when I asked in class, I think I even asked you, like, what, we say we risk a lot to save a lot. We risk a little to save a little. But the middle gray area is, do we we risk a little to save a little, we risk nothing to save nothing. But that little gray area is like, well, our lives are worth a lot. How do we go in these, these burning buildings that are unoccupied? Well, I'll tell you how. That's our job. We still have a duty to protect these, but we're able to try to reduce that risk and to get our people in these structures. You can never take the full risk out of structural firefighting. But if you know your job, if you train, and you have all those functions built into your system, yes, you can go inside these structures all day long and try to put fire out. But you have to have the ability to recognize, structural integrity. You have to recognize, where the fire is. All these educated people to make these decisions, have a RIT team available, backup lines, have the ability to put attack lines, have truck come, the whole gamut of the support. But I think sometimes, we lose focus that why are we really here? And, it's like, okay, well, put your child in that building, put your child there. And you tell them that you're waiting for somebody. And the answer is no, I'm going inside. But here's the thing, is that everybody wants to be aggressive in this building. I mean, in this service, right? Everybody says, I'm going to be aggressive. I wear the badass shirt. I go to every class that says aggression, but yet I've never trained. I'm about 200 pounds overweight. And I just want to be, walk the walk and go to these, go to the show outside and never go to training. Well, you know what? That's why I demand what I do as a fire chief, because if you're going to do it, I demand that you go do these things that are risky. And so do so many other people in our business. But guess what? I can't demand that if you're not ready. And that's part of it. Our people have got to be ready. And that's really the biggest part of the equation is if you're going to be aggressive and you're going to make these decisions, you better be ready and you better train and understand it. I know I went on a tangent.
No, I seriously, that was, I enjoyed it very much so, because I think you're dead on. Competence leads to confidence, which leads to safety, right? That's, if you want to build in safety, train.
Right.
Train in gear. Train in the environment you're going to fight in. Train at the tempo that you're going to fight at, right? You want to look at these elite performing groups. You look at special operations group, whether it's Navy SEALs, Delta Force, whoever. It's not that they're not human beings. They're superhuman. They're not. What is the difference between those guys and everybody else is their level of training and preparation and professionalism and the way that they approach the job, right? They are ready. They train ad nauseum for the basics until they can do them without even thinking about them. And they condition themselves for the environment they're going to fight in. And I think, like, when you look at it from a sports, everybody loves the whole sports analogy. And I think we should, because at the end of the day, we are tactical athletes, but if we're not training, I can tell you right now, being able to force a door in the bay with your helmet and gloves on is far different than putting all your PPE on in a dark, smoke-filled environment and forcing the same door, right?
And knowing someone's behind it.
Right. And I think that's, mindset's part of it, right? It's a mindset that we approach it. But mindset alone, if your body isn't conditioned and your skill sets aren't to where they need to be, that's when we get reckless. That's when we get sloppy. That's when mistakes are made. That's when people get hurt, right? So it's very much a mental and a physical game, so to speak. And when it comes down to, the professional side of it, if you think about it, everybody loves the paramilitary correlation between the fire service and the military until it's time to go work out or go put your gear on and train or to be disciplined to your assignment, based on what needs to happen on the fire ground, based on your order of arrival. Like, everybody wants to, you see this all the time at fires. You watch videos and stuff or go to fires and people want to bottleneck up on scene. Well, somebody has to be disciplined to say, hey, it's my job for water supply. That's not sexy, but someone has to do it. Right. Nobody wants to be the group saying RIT in the front yard, but let's be honest, somebody's got to do that. And I think that's, if we really want to be the professionals we claim to be, then we have to approach the job like professionals. And that means training when you don't want to, working out when it sucks, getting in and reading a fire engineering, magazine or watching a video, talking shop in the firehouse. I'll never understand this. You go to the firehouse, I always laugh and guys are like, oh, this guy's, he's a nerd. Well, he's at work and he's talking about the job. You're at work.
Yeah.
Like, you know
not?
what I'm saying? Like, why,
Right.
why is it that people want to wear the shirts and and the pagers or the radios and get the discounts?
Yeah.
But when it comes time to actually do the work part of it, sometimes it doesn't translate. And that is it. I got to write that down.
No, these guys who get the discounts off somebody else's heroics, that's really infuriating. But I mean, like I tell my people, and I used to tell people in the fire academy, look, there's going to be a time period where you come complacent, right? You're going to come to work. You might not have a fire for sometimes a month or so, right? I mean, it's real. I hate to say that, but it's real. And then all of a sudden, one day in the afternoon, it could be 3 a.m, you wake up and you're like, report of a fire in a house with people trapped. And you're like, oh, did they just say people trapped? And it goes back to the same Andy Fredericks quote that says, the trash man doesn't get excited when they come around the corner and see a trash can. Why are you getting excited when you see fire or hear somebody trapped? That's your job, right? So you should always be ready. And, someday, you may not know this, it might take 30 years, but you're going to make the cover of the Washington Post. And are you ready? Do you want to be that boob that's in the front yard fumbling with your SCBA because you can't claim it's your first time on the job or because you're rusty? That doesn't cut it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about the trucks stuff and how a lot of times we neglect truck work. I tell people all the time, you see some of these like crazy ladder rescues and, the picture of the mom passing the baby to the firefighter on the tip of the ladder who's got his arm reached out to receive this baby. Like that didn't just happen.
Right.
People look at these amazing rescues and it's like, these people were ready for the moment, right? They were ready for their Super Bowl. And when it comes down to it, like, are you ready? You're not going to be proficient at throwing ladders if you don't throw them only but once a year or twice a year.
Yeah.
You're not going to be proficient.
How's your halyard tied,
Right. I mean, there's so many things that it's amazing that, we've seen a lot of social media has had a good influence in this way. For example, mask up times. There are guys that are masking up at 8 seconds flat now with gloves on. And I think like the standard has been raised. And what's beautiful about the internet is it allows us to kind of see where do I stack up, right? So because I used to think like 20 seconds was good. And then I see guys doing it in 8 seconds, like I gotta up my game, right?
Right.
And that's where like I think like when it comes down to it, it's reps. It's all it is, sets and reps. Just like a pro athlete. You know how many jump shots Michael Jordan took in practice compared to how many he took in real games? I mean, I think you made a statement in your class. I mean, basically, what is it like? I got it written down here. It's like 10 minutes for every minute. It's like a 10-to-1 ratio.
It's a 10-to-1. It's 10-to-1.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes of practice for every 1 minute on the playing field.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, to me, that is the definition of a real professional, though, is doing the basics over and over. It's grinding it out. It's practicing when you don't want to. It's training when you don't want to. It's doing the little things right over and over, day in and day out, and kind of leaning into the grind a little bit, right? Leaning into the process. It's not always sexy. It's not that we're running fires every day, but we have to prepare like we're going to go to a fire every shift.
Yeah, the problem is a lot of people feel their education stops after rookie school. And it's like, well, you don't get into SEALs after boot camp. You have to go to BUDS. And you have to continually learn and take it further. I mean, we just give you a very taste in Firefighter 1 and 2. I mean, be honest. I mean, I don't even think we do search correctly when we do it. How many times, you should really do search in about 3 or 4 days with every scenario you can instead of put the mask over your head, do a left-handed, right-handed, or, search on the ground. That's not search, there's so much more, but don't get me on that tangent. But there's so much more that we have to go forward in the ladders and everything else that you have to just keep your hands on, keep busy. And like I said, we don't fight the fires that we did in the 70s, and we don't have them. So you have to keep your mind, constantly in this game and knock the rust off all the time.
Well, everybody loves the military and the athlete analogy, but guess what? If those guys don't perform, where are they?
Yeah, right.
It's a meritocracy. They're not there. They're gone.
You're not gonna right.
Yeah, how would the fire service operate? I mean, think about it. If we started holding ourselves to those standards, like if you don't perform at a high level, like you're benched, or you're gone. Like I think like there'd be a little more impetus to train harder, to be more into the job, and I think when it comes down to it, like that's in the suburban setting. I think you have to go into it with that mindset. Like, we don't have numbers to throw at these fires. So really everybody needs to be on their game. We have to have a game plan. We have to execute the game plan. We have to know. I always tell people, well, what if we have to call an audible? I had an officer used to tell me, we'll figure it out when we get there. And that is the most unprofessional phrase in the fire service, I swear. Because if you're figuring it out when you get there, that means you haven't thought about your plan A, B, or C. You're just kind of winging it, and that makes you an amateur, right? The difference between an amateur and a professional is preparation, it's mindset, it's how you approach the incident, right? And at the end of the day, when lives are on the line, is not the time to go, well, we'll figure it out, right? I think it's always hilarious because people, you can't plan for everything, and what if I got to call an audible? Well, calling an audible means that you're calling it from an original plan A. An audible is a deviation from your standard operating guideline to do something a little different. And here's the thing. Whenever the quarterback calls an audible at the line, everybody on the team knows what that audible looks like.
Right. Yeah, you're not just saying, okay, guess what? I see extra dime, or a nickel back out there. We're just going to run. You just run up the middle. No, they have a running play that's ready to go. It's not just, we're going to make something up because we're not going to throw a pass now.
Right. If that was the case, and I always challenge people this, then you're no different than a citizen at that point with gear.
Yeah,
you're just winging it.
Yeah, you're a well-dressed bystander.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, I just laugh when people say that, well, you can't plan for everything. No, you're right, but you should have at least a default for residential, commercial, multi-residential. Like, there should be some basic game plans.
Right.
If I say, hey, this is a single-family dwelling, and it's booster backup, everybody should know what that is coming in. If I say that we're going to VES that window, everybody should know what tools are getting grabbed, who's doing what, right? We're not bumping into each other at the back of the rig. Like, I thought I was grabbing that. No, you're grabbing that. What?
Right.
I think that's the difference, right? Is are we preparing ahead of time for those realities that eventually, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it happens, 100%. Right? And we're all going to get faced with those incidents throughout our careers.
Yep.
It's how much we apply ourselves to the craft in preparation ahead of time is going to dictate our success on the field. Because I can tell you right now, my experience with this, and I'm sure you felt or seen the same thing, is most people don't rise to the occasion. They usually fall to their base level of preparation.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Especially 3:00 in the morning. It's like, holy cow, what's going on here? And then hopefully your training kicks in and it just becomes part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could go on and on about this. It really is. It does excite me because I enjoy just talking shop in general, but I really enjoy when we start getting into the mindset and how we prepare, and we start getting into the things that we face in suburbia, right? That maybe, like I said, in our urban settings, maybe they can't afford to throw bodies at it. You just got manpower. And having spent the lion's share of my career in limited staffing scenarios, it just has given me, I guess, a love and an appreciation for having to really be the best you could be, because you really can't just sit there and be like, who's backing you up, right? If you've only got 12, 15 people on your initial scene in the first 8 minutes, right? Or less in some cases. At one point I was working in a system where we were lucky to get 10 people on scene on the first alarm. And so it's like, there's nobody else.
You really got to get the most out of your resources, don't you? You got to make every person count.
Yep. And that's where I think, that's my concept and philosophy. I think we feel very much alike on that because, you're in the same boat, right? You're not running, you don't have the problem of endless amounts of money, endless amounts of people. As a chief, you really have to think about how do we maximize what we do have. Like you said earlier in the podcast, we can cry about what we don't have, or we can focus on how to get the most out of what we do have.
True.
That's my soapbox.
No, absolutely. I'm 100% behind you.
So that being said, it's been a little over an hour. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show. But we do our rapid fire at the end here. So I've got 6 questions for you. Okay. And anybody listening, these aren't scripted. He doesn't know the questions. I'm just gonna send it. It's full send.
I hope I don't look dumb.
You won't look dumb. You're way smarter than me. So my questions can't be too complicated. I think maybe. We'll find out. Oh man. So they're pretty generic, but I just your first take on things, your thoughts on things. 6 questions, 60 seconds apiece.
Okay.
You answer them however you see fit, brother. But question number one. This is a personal question for you. What was your favorite position in the fire department coming up through the ranks?
Oh, easily fire captain.
Okay.
I had the best time of my life. I'm telling you, do never cross your bugles. Actually, someone has to, right? But no, in my favorite position was being a fire captain, and if I could do truck company operations and hunting in front of that line, by far the best job in the fire service is getting in front of that line, hunting for people, hunting for fire, and there's nothing in the world that beats that.
Nice, good answer. Yeah, no, that's. And you have you think about it, you kind of set the tempo for the crew, and culturally, like you have probably the most influence, I would argue, in the fire services at that company officer position.
It is by far the best.
Yeah. So that'll segue into my second question. So, if you're arriving on a fire ground and someone gives you, you get to pick your assignment. You get to pick, whether and it could be anything you want, vertical vent, VES, fire attack, search, whatever it is. If you're getting an assignment and you get to hand pick that assignment, what would be your favorite assignment on the fire ground? Your absolute, as a crew, something that you would want to be assigned to?
Fire floor truck. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Like I said, I kind of hinted to it already.
Mm-hmm.
If I got there and I was about the same time as that line going in the door, and I could get in front of that line and do oriented searches, looking for the fire, looking for victims, that by far is my favorite function on the entire fire ground.
Bird. All right. Question number 3. Name a book every firefighter should read.
That's very simple. I have it right here. It's the John Norman Fire Officer's Handbook of Tactics. It got me promoted twice. I'm using it to prop up my computer, but it literally, here, I'm not lying. It's right here. It's the old version too. It's the brown version. Good luck finding this sucker out there. You thought I scripted that. It looks like I scripted that. I really have not scripted that.
No, that was it just happened to be used. I got my computer propped up too, so don't feel bad. But it's my daughter's book from school. No, that being said, I agree. And if you've never read it, it is a phenomenal book. It really is a deep dive in just overall solid book. I agree 100%. If you're going to be competent on the job, that's a book that needs to be in the library. So question number 4, and you can answer this any way you see fit, but whether it's from a chief standpoint, an operations standpoint, a people standpoint, but what do you feel is the greatest challenge facing the American Fire Service in 2024?
I would say that it's probably meeting the demands of our public. With the resources that we have, we're being asked to do so much more. We are being asked to go run fire-based EMS. We're asked to go to these fires. We're asked to run, all these fires with the lower resources that the urban counterparts have. And truly, we are an all-hazard service that we truly are the first responders. And, we are going to be asked to do things that, but believe me, back in the 70s or 80s, when they asked us to do paramedicine, they were probably like, no way, who the hell thinks we're going to do that? And just think of what's next. Then hazmat happens and all these things. But like I said, the demands on us are going to be greater than they've ever been.
And you could probably argue the scrutiny on us is higher than it's ever been. Even looking across the aisle, Chief Thompson talked about it at FDIC, what's happened with the law enforcement community and the public demands of them. It seems like the fire service is not far off from getting that kind of scrutiny. Everybody's got cell phones. Everybody's taking videos. The days of our word against their word doesn't exist anymore because everybody's recording everything. So that is, I tend to agree that it seems like our umbrella keeps getting larger and larger and larger. So that is kind of the first part of this next question, which I think kind of corresponds to that, is what are the greatest opportunities for the fire service going forward? What are some things you see as maybe untapped potential or opportunities for us to improve things that maybe we're right on this cusp of, if we can just seize the momentum, would be something the fire service can really improve on?
Well, I think I don't think that we've really done a good job of using fact-based um, tactical implementation. And I really think that some of the advantages we have right now are the UL and the FSRI studies and all the stuff that's coming out now, the Mayday, Project Mayday, the rescue survey. Before we just did things because that's the way we've always done them and it just makes logical sense. But now we actually have fact and we have science and we have truth. To really, when I wrote Suburban Fire Tactics in 2013, even back then, I wrote the book in 2011, 2012. I had none of this. None of this was here. And a lot of it was just, previous experiences. But, this stuff is really helpful to us. Even in that mid 2015, 2016 era, you had people screaming about how this is a waste of our time, how our experience should really overplay the science. And really, it's just helping us, and I really think that that's an untapped thing that we need to use to help us with our tactical delivery. I know you're probably looking at, well, I'm not going to be that guy that says, the public medicine or whatever. But I mean, there's different things for us to accomplish in the fire service. But from a tactical perspective, I really think that the research is where we need to untap.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think maybe the fire service is a little slow sometimes to come around to some of this stuff. But it is good and it is encouraging to see more and more chief officers, company officers gravitating towards more data-driven decision-making, and not just, because like you said, a lot of it was anecdotal in the past or things that we just kind of learned that made sense through experiences and stuff. But being able to see and validate some of the things that we've done or do, I think drives an important point. And when we're trying to, especially when we're trying to maintain funding, right, to the public, when we have data to back it up, it's really hard to refute facts. We can have different opinions on stuff all day long, but facts are facts. And I think like that's the beauty of it is you take the emotion out of the decision making, right, and become very much hey, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And I think it really becomes a red pill, blue pill, like as a chief, you go there for funding, for staffing, because you need more staffing. Like, we again, going back to being realistic about what we can and can't do. I think, saying, hey, these are the priorities. These are why we have these priorities. And kind of putting it out to the public, like, hey, this is why we're asking for your support. We're not just because we want more money or because we, think we need more cool stuff. Like, this is how we serve you better. This is how and I think like most people in the public, if you can justify, why you need what you do, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards, okay, these guys are being logical, right? They're using not just we want. It's here's why we need. And I can imagine. I mean, I've never been a fire chief, but I can imagine that actually helps your argument when you're getting or requesting things.
Justification and making it tangible are really what I need, and that's what every fire chief needs. And I think that this research and these projects really help us achieve that.
Yeah, 100%. So last question for you. Obviously, we're into May, so about half the year is about gone. But what is something for the rest of 2024 that you're looking most forward to, either personally, professionally? But what's something on the horizon for you that you're really looking forward to as we kind of go towards the back half of the year here?
Well, sure. The main thing that I'm really looking forward to, and I was hoping it'd be done by FDIC, but we're not there, is that we have a new book coming out. It's called The Non-Traditional Truck Company. It was written by myself and a truck company captain that you may have heard of, Arthur Ashley, out of Lexington, Kentucky. And we're expanding on some of these suburban fire tactics ideas on the resources and the need. And we put together this book, like I said, called The Non-Traditional Truck Company. And it talks about, the need, the prioritization of function, the need for facilitation, but also it goes a little step further. So I do the nerdy aspect of writing all the SOP, SOG stuff. He goes into the attitude and culture of what it truly takes to have good truck company operations and to get that in your organization, which I think is just as important as the academic stuff. And we've got quotes in there from people from throughout the fire service community. And I'm really looking forward to this. And I think it's a much needed type of reference that hopefully will get out there and people will enjoy and really help, help their service out a little bit. But that's coming up here. It's in layout right now. So hopefully in a couple months, we'll have a finished product.
Excellent. And that'll be through Fire Engineering?
Fire Engineering Books, yes.
Awesome. So something to put on the calendar for those of you listening. Be on the lookout for that book when it hits the bookshelves, hopefully in the next few months. And definitely should be ready by FDIC next year. So if for some reason you missed the but that being said, Chief, it's been fun. We've been on here a little over an hour. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for kind of giving us a little bit of your insight and experiences where you're at. And hopefully, in fact, I know for a fact people are going to enjoy it. I think a lot of people are, especially that listen to the show, tend to be in the more suburban side of things and get a lot of feedback from people all the time about, hey, thanks for keeping it real with how we operate, because this is our world.
That's right.
So thank you again. Like I said, It means a lot that you kicked the fourth season off for the podcast with us, and we'll be looking forward to your book. And is there any, I know you'll be at FDIC next year, but are any teaching things on the horizon maybe that if folks want to come check you out or listen to you speak that you'll be doing in the next few months, or are you kind of taking the summer off? Or
no, I can never take the summer off, but
you're a Chief, so.
I've got Jason, my buddy and I, Jason Overman, will be teaching a class here in Missouri coming up in next week. Missouri Winter Fire School. We got a new class called Tactical Impact. That's a 12-hour actual workshop that we'll be doing, and then I think I'm also scheduled to go to the Montana Fire Chiefs here at the end of summer. But I have that and a couple other chiefing obligations. But I try to keep the summer to my children. I have 4 kids. They're all home from school. Our house is bustling. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I got you. Well, yeah, hopefully, like I said, we'll keep an eye out on the book, and then we'll get this thing edited and should be pumped out here this evening. So we'll tag you in it, and feel free to share the podcast with anybody. But again, it means a lot that you took some time out of your day to come on here. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I've got some notes here that I took from the podcast that I thought were really good. But it's everything I had hoped for and more, man. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Very, very much. If people listen to the show, if you haven't read the book, Suburban Fire Tactics, check it out. And please, by all means, I'm sure, Chief, if they want to, reach out to you, you'd be more than happy to answer any questions. What is a way maybe they can get a hold of you if they had questions or wanted it, wanted access to some information?
So you can either find me on Facebook or just go straight to my email at jim@suburbanfiretactics.com. Send me a shout out or find me on social media. Like I said, I predominantly do Facebook. I try to answer. I've even had questions about test questions sent to me about the book, which I try to answer as fast as I can. I had a couple people, disputing questions on tests. That's always interesting. But get to me as quick as you can, and I'll get back to you. Any questions that you have. The book is getting there. It's 11 years old now. It's still relevant. It's still going. I am going to be working. I had to get this other book pumped out first, but we are working on edition 2. So if you have anything, I tell you what's great about the book is it's dynamic, and I'm open to anything. If you've got a great idea for me that you think should be in Suburban Fire Tactics, send me a note. I'll even give you credit for it. So
nice. Yeah. Thanks for the info. And like I said, if you guys got questions for the Chief, please reach out to him. And with that being kind of wrapping it up here for the day, I hope you have a great afternoon, brother. We'll hopefully see you sooner than later, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You're keeping the fire service moving forward and making it better. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, pal. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too.
See you.